Pulling motions for strength training during pregnancy. We basically have two different types of pulling motions. One is a horizontal pull and a vertical pull. A horizontal pull would be a bent over row, for example, and a vertical pull is your classic pull up, or we can think of a lat pull down, anything of that nature. What we want to think about when we are doing both horizontal and vertical pulling is really hugging baby. Pulling motions can tend to be some of the motions that can put a little more outward pressure on the core. So we just want to be cognizant of matching our tension to task with our deep core activation as we are going through these movements. For a horizontal pulling motion, so a bent over row, for example, one of the things that I really want you to keep in mind is when you are doing a single arm bent over row is your form matters a lot, okay? We don't want these rows to get all up into our traps. We don't want them to get into our low back. So there's a few key things to keep in mind. When you are doing a single arm bent over row, the lower the surface that you use, the harder this is going to be kind of on your back. So if you start to feel these in your back, then raise up the surface that you are resting your hand on. That can make a big difference. So this is with a 3-point row right here. So if I am doing my row in this position right here, this is great. I'm getting a lot of glute length. I'm getting a little bit of hamstring work, but this is a pretty demanding position on the low back. So just know that it can be really helpful to raise that surface up. Another thing we can do is use a 2-point row. So that means that you will have one leg on the ground and one leg is going to be bent up on your bench like so. So you would be right here to do your bent over rows. And although this may look a little more intense than the 3-point row, this is actually a little bit easier. I find this version to be a little more friendly on the low back. So there's just some choices there for you to keep in mind. As you are rowing, no matter what position you are using, another thing I want you to keep in mind is that your elbow needs to come back. Your elbow does not need to come up. If our elbow comes up, then our wrist is going to be right along our bra line, and I don't want your wrist way up here. I want your wrist coming towards your waist. As your wrist comes towards your waist, what's going to happen is you're going to open up through your chest. Okay, I want your shoulder to move back, and then your elbow moves diagonally back as well. Notice that I don't close the space right here. The top of my shoulder doesn't come more towards my chin. As I am rowing, I want to make sure that I can pull back and then I keep that space nice and open as I row up. You should feel single arm bent over rows in your back right here. That's where you should feel it working. You're going to exhale, hug baby as you row up. When you look at yourself doing this, if you look and you look like this right here, that's not it, okay? I don't know any other way to say it except that's not it. The way that I want you to look when you're doing this is you're down here and you're gonna open right here, okay? This stays open. And you're gonna come back and that elbow is gonna come at an angle, and you really wanna think about bringing that wrist to your waist while this stays open and the shoulder stays down. To show you an example of how this looks in real time. So I am going to do a 3-point bent over row. I've got my weight right here. So I'm going to start, if I'm doing a bilateral stance, I usually start with the weight at a little more of an angle like so versus vertical. If I have more of a staggered stance, I can start with the weight vertical. But I'm using this bilateral stance, so I'm going to start right here. First thing I'm going to do is exhale. Really push away with the other hand, and then I'm going to bring the weight back, okay? I'm not bringing the weight here. It's not this. Here I'm just getting a lot of upper trap and it just doesn't feel like anything. But when I come back and up, this feels like I'm working my back. The other thing I don't want to do here is as I'm bringing this back and up is to kind of arch, to bring it up like this, okay? We want to make sure that the mover here is just your arm. Nothing else needs to be moving to create that pulling motion. When it comes to vertical pulling during pregnancy, one of the biggest things I want to emphasize is just making sure that you're getting that nice long exhale and that you're also being honest with yourself about what's happening. A lot of times during pregnancy, we just don't want to give up our pull-ups, especially if we've got them. They're super fun to do, and it's just not fun when you have to say, I don't think that they're the best for me anymore. But being honest with yourself about what's happening is really key. It doesn't mean you're not going to do pull-ups anymore. It just means that we're not going to do them for a little while. There are a lot of other really great pulling motions that can feel quite hard during pregnancy that you can sub in instead. If you are doing pull-ups, what you want to make sure to keep in mind is that I would encourage you to start doing your pull-ups in more of a hollow body position. So having your feet slightly in front of you versus back like this. When you do your pull-ups in this position right here, a lot of times you'll see people do them with their legs crossed behind them or just more with their legs back like this. You're creating a lot more extension in your abdomen. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but during pregnancy, we're just trying to give a little more TLC to that connective tissue, to our linea alba, to our deep core, and being more in that extension pattern just really is putting more pressure on a system that is already under stress. The other thing we want to keep in mind when we're doing any sort of pulling motion is that as you're pulling down, so as you're going from the bottom to the top of a pull-up, we're really going to exhale, hug baby, hug baby. If you are doing any other sort of like lat pull down, thing of that nature, you would exhale all the way down, and then you want to keep some tension as you go back to the starting position. So just because we're able to exhale and pull, really get nice connection, doesn't mean that we just need to let it go at the end, because we still got that eccentric portion where we are coming back to the starting position. So make sure that you hang on to some tension as you're going through that eccentric portion of the movement. Those are most of the things that we want to keep in mind when we are thinking about horizontal pulling and vertical pulling during pregnancy. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.